I'd like to introduce you to my final guest of the day, who was sitting in this room about a year ago, and I remember him coming up to the front of the room and talking about a deal that he was looking at, just like people have done this morning. He went on and completed this deal. It was a multi-million pound deal. The numbers are big numbers. They're good numbers, strong numbers. And I've asked him to come along today to tell you about how he found the deal, how he negotiated the deal, how the deal was structured, how he priced the deal, how he did the deal, and then what's happened, I think, in about the 3 months, something like 3 months since he bought this business. So please, would you put your hands together and welcome to the front of the room, Jamil. There you go. You can sit, you can stand, whatever you feel comfortable doing. It wasn't a year ago, it was March, which was nine months ago. All right. But I say that because I want to inspire people who are sitting here, particularly for the first time, to realise that if you actually get moving in 9 months' time, you would have achieved the goal that you set out to achieve today. So 9 months ago, tell us how you started your search for a business to buy.
Sure. So I had already drafted out what my strategy was going to be in terms of the big vision. You referred to it as big, audacious, hairy goal or something like that. Yeah. So I kind of already knew exactly what it was I wanted to achieve. Now it's a case of sort of executing it. So I didn't go into it kind of thinking, I want to buy a business, I'm not too sure what, I'll feel around and see what bites. I was very sort of pointed with what I was trying to achieve. From a kind of strategic point of view, there had to be something unique about the business, so it wasn't just a Me Too business. It had to have a second-tier management team in place. So preferably I'll be talking to a vendor that does not have a hands-on role within the business. Financially as well, I was quite greedy in the sense of I come from quite a privileged corporate position. So I was like, whatever jump I make to buy a business needs to sustain similar level of income. So it needs to be a significant sized business.
Because when you were in this, I remember you were sitting over here, I think.
Yeah, well, I remember.
And you were sitting on the same table as Harry, I think, as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember where everyone sits. I know where you sit. So you were sitting over here. It was when we had the stage over that side of the room, and you were sitting here at the back. Were you working then?
Yes, I was.
Right. So,
yeah.
So you were in full time, and also under quite a pressured environment. So probably more than the typical 9 to 5.
Yeah, absolutely.
The reason I'm saying this is because sometimes people say, I'm working a full-time job, will I have time to buy a business? So how did you fit it all in?
So I think there's a couple of... I'm slightly different to probably some people in the room in the sense that, can you buy a business alongside a full-time job? Yes. Did I want to? No. And the reason is the demands of the job I was in were 80 to 100 hour weeks anyway, and it's the sort of jobs where you have to kind of run it as your own sort of business. I was a partner, so you have to kind of run it as your own business. There's no way I could have bought a business the size that I was looking for with the ambition that I had for it, whilst also being a partner in the company I was in. So there are different businesses out there. People have different careers to what I had. So yes, absolutely. If you do a different type of career, you can have multiple businesses alongside your full-time career. I know people that do that very, very well. It's not for me personally. I wanted to kind of go all in on the buy and build that I'm doing, because I know that if I outsource the success of my group to an individual, i.e. a general manager, a managing director, it is not going to have the same level of success if me, the founder with the idea and the big vision, dedicates 100% of my time to it.
So you were quite happy to swap your 100 hours a week for a very hands-on role in the businesses that you buy, because in actual fact you probably would work less than what you're working, but the upside would be larger.
Yeah, absolutely. But hands-on as in I do not get involved with the operations of the business, at all. So I am here today, I've had one email, that's it. Lots and lots and lots of time traveling around the world doing various different things, other business interests. I don't turn up to the office. I probably go there once every few months. I don't have a hands-on role. My involvement is strategic. It's working on it rather than in it. It's looking at the M&A strategy. It's delivering the corporate strategy. I spend a lot of time in developing a management team. So I spend a lot of time, finance, strategy, M&A people, and then the team then execute. But I don't. My role isn't data.
So it's really that's textbook, right? That's exactly. Yeah. If you worked out the perfect scenario, you're living that perfect scenario. So let's fast forward to the first conversation with the owner of the business that you bought. So this was presumably where it lasted more than a few minutes, and you thought there could be something here. What made you think that this was appealing?
So the first phone call. So the letters went out January this year. They actually called in February, had an initial Teams call, although because of the distance, but initially they emailed me and said, when can we meet in person? How about we meet halfway? And I kind of thought, wow, this guy's been super aggressive in that sense. Let's meet face to face. Whereas sometimes you can speak to business owners and they're a bit skeptical. Why are you interested in my business? Whereas this guy was like, let's meet. How about Saturday at this hotel halfway between us? And I sort of thought, well, before I commit to that, let's screen you properly first. So I had a Teams call with them, and they're a bit coy about the kind of, I say coy, probably humble is a better word, about the size of the business and what it actually does. So it was only really when he started mentioning the turnover and the profitability that my ears sort of pricked up, because they played a very good game at humbling it but almost to nothing on the phone. So I wasn't really that interested until you mentioned the numbers. So that sort of initial screening call, 30 to 40 minutes, the two shareholders, they're both on the call, and then we met, I think about 5 days later in person. It was a 4-hour journey for each of us, and we spent best part of 3 hours in a hotel room. Well, not a hotel room, hotel.
One way to get a deal done.
Come back from that now. In a hotel cafe, all above board, multiple coffees, bacon sandwiches, that kind of thing, and basically agreed the deal there, and then sat and completed
you weren't here this morning, but I actually kind of said exactly the same thing this morning, didn't I? About you said have the coffee until you get the deal done.
Yeah. And it was that was probably the greatest thing I did in terms of setting the tone for the deal, because it built trust. Just those little, conversations in between, talking shop, getting to know each other as people, having a coffee, having a bacon sandwich, telling a few anecdotes, taking a couple of personal phone calls when you're there, and then obviously telling the backstory. And you kind of just build some rapport with them, which means they're then more comfortable and you're more comfortable to collaborate when putting a deal together. And that was really the beauty of this deal, is both parties collaborated. It wasn't an us and them mentality. Sure,
it wasn't an arm wrestle as to who's going to win on this deal. It was you both working together to get a win-win outcome.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you agreed the overall basics of the deal at that meeting.
Yep.
So what did it look like at that stage? Because I know it changed later. So what did it look like at that stage?
Yeah, so I went there having had the financial information through before I went, so I'd already spent some time sort of going through and get familiar with the numbers. My initial thoughts were, and I didn't know what they needed for the business at that stage, so I had no idea what they were going to ask, but I knew how much I was prepared to pay for it. I had in my mind how much I would be able to raise on invoice finance, how much I'd be able to raise on asset finance, ruled out EBITDA loans and everything like that. But it was a good, clean business, a ton of cash on the balance sheet, no debt, no outstanding directors' loans or anything like that. So when it then came down to actually talking about price, again, it wasn't an on-the-nose question. It kind of came after building some rapport. We spoke about the future of the business, any kind of add-backs to the EBITDA I need to be aware of. And then I said, okay, so it sounds like you know how much you need for the business. And they sort of nodded and said, yeah, and they'd had a deal fall through previously, so they'd already gone through this exercise. And that they said, we're looking for 2.8 million. And I kind of had in my mind that they'd probably be more after 3. So I was kind of pleasantly surprised. After some questioning...
It's a good thing they went first, right?
Yeah, absolutely. After some questioning of the accounts, I think they realised I was sceptical of the price. So he then said, actually, I won't accept less than 2.2. So I thought, well, I've just saved myself 600 grand in the space of 30 minutes. This is going well. So I then kind of went through it with them and said, well, look, if I was to get anywhere near that number, this is how it would need to be structured. And basically sat down with them and walked them through the structure of the deal then and there. At the time, most of it was going to be, initial consideration was going to be from the cash in the business bank account. The remainder was then a combination of sort of invoice finance, asset finance, and a tiny bit of deferred on the end, and that was that. Later on, so we signed heads of terms to that effect, all went away, happy days. About 2 weeks later, we'd sort of initiated, the advisors, their advisors came on board. I went up to see them, visited the premises after hours, spent a good few hours walking around the premises. Sat down, went over the deal. They had never done anything like it before. They're not business people. They don't have any kind of commercial acumen, really. When I went to visit them and we sat down, they wanted to go over just their understanding of the deal a bit more. So again, trying to get their head around the cash in the company account not being theirs and being used as initial consideration, understanding the costs of the invoice finance, the costs of the asset finance. By that stage, we'd already sort of booked in to have the sort of touch metal valuation of the assets. But again, we sort of knew how much we were looking at raising. And they then sort of expressed, we're not really happy using finance for you to buy this business. We've been debt-free for 30 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever it was. We don't have any debt. We manage everything's bought cash, including all the manufacturing equipment. Not really comfortable with you incurring debt to buy it, which for me told me everything I needed to know in terms of their motivations. It wasn't just about money, it was about stewardship and taking over the business in a responsible way, which I think is often overlooked, but I can come on to that later. So we basically sat there and then reconfigured the deal so that it was 50% cash out the business account on day one, on completion. The remainder deferred over 5 years, so no finance needed whatsoever. And there was a very slight gap I needed to bridge. 15% equity retained in the business, just about covered that. So it didn't cost me any of my personal funds whatsoever. So the deal we completed on was 50% cash in bank, their bank, the remainder paid out over 5 years, starting after a quarter's breathing space, basically. So we had 90 days after the deal completed before any deferred payments started. In actual fact, I'll probably try to go for 6 months next time round, just because it means you're kind of well clear of the completion accounts process if ever there was a...
Absolutely, yeah. So again, we were talking earlier about, you probably did hear this part where we were saying about sometimes they owe you rather than you owe them. But just want to recap on something quite important. They didn't want the business to have debt because quite often, maybe it's a more old-fashioned approach to business is that it's bad to have debt. Maybe just an old-fashioned approach to life perhaps is no debt. My parents, you don't want to owe anyone any money, don't want to have debt. The fact of life is that if you've got a growing business, there's going to be some debt in there. However, because they didn't want you to have debt, you actually ended up with a better deal where there were no external lenders with charges over the company, no interest rate hikes.
Exactly.
And you just pay them instead of paying the finance company.
Yeah, and when we went through and looked at the actual costs of the invoice finance and the asset finance, it was pre-interest rates being cut. So they were quite significant. And there's arrangement fees and there's all that kind of stuff. So, and also the admin can be a bit of a nightmare. And at the same time, I was still sort of working my corporate job. So time was sort of the essence. Really, we wanted things to be as smooth and efficient as possible. They weren't paperwork people. So they wanted things to be as seamless and as smooth as possible, which was another selling point. This is the most simple way we can do it. And they didn't like the idea of banks earning big fees off of their business. Again, probably a bit of an old-fashioned mentality, but it worked out. And so now we're into regular monthly payments of their deferred consideration. The vendors have completed their handover period. They've now stepped away from the business completely, albeit one of them still has a small fractional ownership of the business, but on a different share class to me. And we've sort of turned the page and we're on to the new growth strategy now.
So when you arrived today, I said, how's everything going? I said, still making money. And you told me the profit level of the business. If you could just share that with everyone.
Yeah, so the EBITDA for 9 months of the financial year so far is around 1.1 million from when I last looked on the P&L.
For a 9-month period?
Yeah. And it was.
So those are round of applause, right? Good.
It was. I was just. I've refreshed my memory.
Does that replace your employed income?
Yes. Yeah. Is the honest answer. I sort of refreshed my memory before coming on because people say, well, what was the EBITDA before you bought the company? And as Johan was saying a minute ago, the accounts tell a story. So you look at it and go, oh, it's making 300,000. And then you go, well, actually, when I add back their pensions and this and that, it's making 600,000. And then you adjust it back the other way. So it's always a bit of a moving picture. So I literally sat there about an hour ago and looked at what the corporation tax was. The corporation tax, I think, is about to be paid on 600,000 of profit. So in the previous financial year, prior to my ownership, the company did 600,000 of profit. 9 months of this year, we're now on track for about 1.2. Well, in fact, we've done 1.2. And it's so that's how quickly you can turn things around and grow things.
And okay, so what would you put down that growth to? What did you do differently to the previous owners?
This is a subject in its whole, on its own, but essentially, so I come from a strategy consulting background, so I used to work for some of the biggest companies in the world doing corporate strategy, Accenture, worked with McKinsey, KPMG, all those types of companies. So that was my bread and butter. So going into a company and going, right, how are we going to turn this around? What's the growth strategy is kind of, that was my day job. And going into private equity firms and helping them do it with their portfolio companies. So immediately, before I even put boots on the ground on day one, we had the plan. This is what we're executing. This is the cost we're cutting. These are the strategic initiatives we're going to grow into. This is what we're doing for people, process and technology. So all of that. And instead of going, well, let's just...
You're watching this because you're interested in buying a business. So get my business buying toolkit free of charge. 17 downloads, videos, reports, and my books as well, completely free of charge. The link is right below.
Well, let's just sit back and sort of see. It was day one, boom, straight in. This is what we're doing. And it wasn't aggressive in the sense of 10 people lose their jobs and, that system's going and we'll start this zero migration, the next day. We had a proper plan, which was built from experience, really, of knowing where we could slip up. But the short answer is dramatically cut unnecessary waste and cost out the business.
Give us some examples.
Examples would be energy. So the premises that we have in the part of the country where the business is 41,000 square foot. So it's significant. They had not checked their energy bills, as in done a price comparison like you do on Money Supermarket or whatever, ever. So that was immediately a £28,000 a year saving from one phone call. The other thing was business rates. The space is basically split out over different units. One of the units is in the name of a different company because the group of companies is actually 3 limited companies. They hadn't claimed small business rates relief, so that could potentially mean a rebate of 30, 40 grand. There was a lot of overstaffing. I think we've taken the staffing down, and this wasn't in one hit, this has been over 5 months. We've taken staffing down from about 45 to 34 now. Each one of those people was on a salary between 40 and 60,000 pounds a year. So there's your profitability back, but more profitability because it was obviously pretty profitable. But there's just loads of examples of things like that. Subscriptions they were paying for that they, just historical subscriptions and credit card fees. Even though they're paying the credit cards off, that, you know, they hadn't aligned it properly, so they were paying interest and just silly things like that. So we did a big exercise of moving the business over from ClearBooks over to Xero, which Johan's team helped with. It can be a bit of a nightmare. Don't try and do it without expert advice, would be my opinion. But in doing that, it gave us the transparency over all the numbers in the business we didn't have before. And that itself revealed where some of the sort of leaks were. And then we just sort of dug deeper. And there's a number of things, like there were some staff that are busy for 4 days of the week, not doing much for 5. So we were like, well, we don't want to make you redundant, so why don't we increase your annual leave allowance for you to take a lower salary, which 4 out of 5 people said yes to. So there was just different things like that. A lot of technological processes we brought in to cut down manual processes. That saved a load of time, a load of cost as well. £900 a month on photocopiers. Well, why are we using paper anyway? You know, obviously there's a training element there, but that's you know, saved over 10 grand a year. Sure. It all racks up.
Very good. So I interrupted you when you were saying the things that we did to improve profitability. The first you said was cost or waste reduction. Mm-hmm. The second?
Cost, we put prices up by 4%.
Okay.
That resulted in hundreds of thousands to the bottom line pretty much immediately, because the industry can take it. It's not a price-sensitive industry. It's not a commodity industry. What else did we do? So the introduction of technology freed people up, which meant that their time could be better spent elsewhere. Naturally, it revealed a few people that were dead weight. You know, don't be mean, but let's be honest. So those people did get let go. Better transparency over the bookkeeping, as I mentioned, revealed where costs needed to be cut. Our procurement manager hit the phones, got all the suppliers in, did a massive price comparison exercise they'd never done before. We now pay, our cost of goods has gone down by 11% now as a result of that. And like I say, it all racks up. I haven't yet done, I'm sure we will, Johan, at some point, sit down and go through and total up what all these savings actually mean. But it's, for me, that's the most exciting thing about buying an established business, is you can affect change like that. It can be good change, it can be bad change, but you can affect change rapidly. And that's why I much prefer this to sort of the startup world.
100%. So if you were to summarize some of the things that you learned during this process that would be beneficial to everyone here, what would they be?
I think the biggest, or one of the biggest things that helped me was really developing your own credibility, in the sense of, it's very easy to assume people just want the price that they want for the business, and they want good deal terms, and they want it all on day one. I would say that's probably about 30 to 40% of it. The rest is stewardship, especially if it's a business they've built up over years. I don't want to digress too much, but I remember when the owners finished their 90-day handover period and they stepped out the business after 30 years, and it was kind of a bit flat. I kind of thought, God, if I retired from a business after 30 years, I'd want there to be a brass band and fireworks and balloons and, you know, a pat on the back and people crying and it wasn't. They turned up, took their things out the drawer and went. And I kind of thought, so I think it's important that people, you know, you realise that these people have committed a huge amount of time, amount of their lives to some of these businesses, and it's not all about the money. It is also about who they're handing it over to. It is getting competitive out there now. You've got private equity being more aggressive than ever. They've got fatter wallets than ever. There's strategic buyers, so established companies in your industries with big pockets that are looking to buy up smaller companies. You need to figure out what differentiates you and what makes your view different about their business than everyone else. The bit that's going to set you apart and give you the unique advantage is humanising that process and letting them know what's different about you as a business buyer and why you are the safe pair of hands to take it forward. Because a lot of businesses, if they're a good business, got cash in the bank, profitable, they're going to have offers, they're going to have interested parties. So figure out how to be credible, figure out how to sell yourself in that way.
That's great advice, and I can tell you right now what makes you stand out from anyone else. It's you. It's you as a unique individual, and it's that rapport that you build with the seller. So you don't have to reinvent yourself, just be yourself, because that connection with the seller is what it's all about. And you will hear sellers say to you, yeah, we did talk to some people, we didn't really get on with them. We didn't really feel that they would care for the business, or they would fire a lot of people and relocate it, or everyone would lose their jobs. So you said stewardship, that sort of that legacy, continuation of the business. Find out what it is that matters to that seller, and then if you are honestly able to be congruent with the outcome that they're looking for. You don't want to, if they say we have to keep all the staff and keep everyone here, and the next day you relocate and fire everyone. I mean, you don't want to be that person. So absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, you're going on a long journey. Even if the deal gets done rapidly in like 3 to 4 months, there's still a handover period. You've still then got completion accounts, and that can go either way. And then there's possibly a deferred period. So it could be a relationship that lasts years, especially if you do a deal where they're still retaining some equity in the business. So you need to kind of make sure, and I know it's difficult when the business is sexy and you want it and it's profitable, but think to yourself, is this somebody that I could potentially have a difficult conversation with, or I could confront, or have to have a challenging conversation, or we're butting heads, and could I see myself actually working with them in a constructive way? Because if the relationship has just been transactional throughout the deal, emails, their solicitor speaks to your solicitor, and you're not really kicking the tires on your relationship, believe me, the tough times will come at some point. You do not know how the completion accounts are going to go until you're in the business. And you will find yourself having difficult conversations with them. You could let a member of staff go even after they've left the business as their best mate, and then ring you up and go, well, why have you done that? I wouldn't have sold you the business if I knew you were going to be firing the staff. So you kind of need to think to yourself, the rapport building is so important, because it's almost like going into a relationship, with your other half. There's going to be testing times. Can we get through this constructively? On the basis of the relationship we have. And if you don't think you can, spend a bit more time with them. Go and visit the business, have a few more phone calls, go for a few drinks. When you get to the upper end of the M&A world, the sort of private equity investment banking world, the majority of the partners and people like that are not in the office. They are out with people, putting time and investment into relationships. And through that, they find out about other deals. So that would be the other thing, is invest in the relationships.
What happens next?
So, as I mentioned to you earlier on, we were about to complete a deal which would have been last week on a second acquisition. Unfortunately, fell through. They decided to do a management buyout. So we're going to do a joint venture strategic alliance with them instead. Definitely going to be hitting the M&A trail again in the new year. See what else is out there now that we have a sizable company that we can kind of take to market and say we're interested in you. We are looking at doing more joint ventures as a route into M&A. So we would start working with, and actually one of the people we're speaking to is an ex-masterminder in similar sort of industry. They do a different part of the industry than what we serve, but there's synergies that could be had, i.e. we sell your services, you sell our product, you take 10%, we take 10%, and then eventually you'd see where that goes. If you work well together, you get to know them, then you can start to have conversations about, can I buy 20% of your company, or things like that. So we're definitely looking along those routes. Continue to be driving through the new technology and working on the business. That will continue probably until at least the end of the financial year. We're doing a huge amount of public sector tendering at the moment. In fact, the sales inquiries, I think it's partly seasonal and partly our new approach to sales. General manager was on the phone about an hour ago. We've quoted for £1.3 million worth of work this week, which could potentially start in the new year. We've signed up a load of new clients, and it's big contracts. It's kind of 6-figure plus contracts we take on. We've done £15 million worth of public sector tendering in the last month, so pushing the team towards that. And just, like I say, continue to work on the business and grow organically and by acquisitions.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And best of luck.
Exactly.
Thank you.